I'm thinking that the other side of the conversation. Can you hear through the phone? If it doesn't work and we need to change.
But because we can always stand if we need to, but I don't know.
Oh, you know our audience is small for your services anyway. So.
Right. I mean, this one not.
Alright, let's see if this works a little bit better. I mean, I can even get you for that. Y'all know how to do it now? I don't, right? Give it a try. Alright, and we're gonna let y'all share, they need some seats for their,
We can do this.
can y'all share this one seat?
Yeah.
Alright, I'm gonna switch it over and y'all get one seat.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Alright, tell me if that doesn't work,
Yeah.
you go ahead, come up with
Yeah,
that
I think we'll,
idea.
yeah, I'll let you know. Alright, this should be good.
I'm flexible.
Thank you so much.
Alright, good luck.
Yeah, I know. 2 days we've been in Pennsylvania all the house.
Are you okay?
Yeah, first row. So they're gonna take these two seats, so.
We just need one. Yeah, just the police one.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think you all can spread out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yep. Thank you. Close to, right? Yeah. I was in Germany. Yeah, we were probably there.
I saved that for dinner.
Do some housekeeping.
Don't feel like you're touching.
We'll be ready.
Nickel design.
Which mic am I using? Both? Hot mic.
I don't actually even.
That's-
Well, extend the joke.
This one's on too?
All right, so Pam's telling me we have some cars in the parking lot, so I'm stalling right now.
I was stalling for you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Polly said I work for tips, and it's not true.
Right.
So many jokes, man.
Um,
So many jokes.
Last time we were in this type of setting, Brian had to say, Senator, I do not recall. We're ready for whatever you got.
I do like some humorous people. All right, so we're going to do some housekeeping first. Thanks for being here tonight. I know that we don't know what the weather's going to be tomorrow morning, so for you guys to come out tonight, it's a big deal. Thank you very much for being here. I'm Dawn Hammett. I'm the director here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. And I am overjoyed to have you guys back for our first Evenings at Ease of 2020. We had a big pause. We paused for Thanksgiving and Christmas months, so we're back in the saddle. Thanks for being here. I'd like to ask you to take this time to silence your cell phones. I need to do it when I go back to my place, so hopefully I'll remember. And if you didn't notice, we have Eagle Communications here. They're taping this for us, and they'll replay it on their channel. So at the end, when we have some question and answer time, I'm going to ask you to make sure that you speak into the microphone, which Pam will have at that time, just so the people at home, when they watch this, can hear you as well. We have out on some of the chairs, we have some surveys. I'm going to ask you to fill that out of the goodness and kindness of your heart. Fill that out and turn it back into Pam at the end of the program. This really helps us determine what our community wants and needs from these sorts of lifelong learning programming. So thank you for that in advance. And we have some upcoming programs I wanted to tell you about. Did our community members get one of these? This is our calendar for the year, all of our programs. So next month we have our book talk on March 10th, and it's Mrs. Miniver. It has a movie with it on March 8th. That's listed in here. And then next month's Lunch and Learn is March 26th, and we will have with us Gregory Fontenot, who will be talking about this book, which has not been released yet, according to this book. Pam, how'd you get your hands on this? So this one's not for sale. So Gregory Fontenot wrote Loss and Redemption at St. Vith, the 7th Armored Division in the Battle of the Bulge, and he'll be here to talk to us about his research and his book on March 26th. For those of you who may not have heard, Pam Sanfilippo, who has put together all of these lifelong learning programs for us all of these long months, has accepted another job in her hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. So we at the Eisenhower Presidential Library are very excited for her and her new career opportunity, but don't make me cry because she's leaving us. So when you get a chance to see her, tell her thank you for all that she's done for us as a community and for you personally with the programs that she's provided to us. And I'm not going to cry. So tonight's program is sponsored by the Eisenhower Foundation and the Union Pacific Foundation. And as you know, all of our programs and exhibits are made possible through the partnership with the Eisenhower Foundation and your generous sponsorship. If you'd like to learn anything more about the foundation, to become a friend, to have a planned giving arrangement, or any other sort of support, please contact the Eisenhower Foundation or visit their website, eisenhowerfoundation.net. Now, gentlemen, I've done my housekeeping. Are we prepared?
I think so.
Okay, so I am personally very thankful that one of our neighbors is Fort Riley. We at the Eisenhower Library, we contact Fort Riley quite frequently. We utilize the soldiers, and it's a really lovely partnership that I am very, very proud of. They participate in our Symphony at Sunset in June, as you know, and other things throughout the year. And now we're going to talk a little bit about NATO. Eisenhower was the first Supreme Commander of NATO, and the work of NATO continues today, thanks to our friends with the Big Red One. And we can hear firsthand about current training missions with NATO. Recently, the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team and the 1st Combat Aviation Brigade participated in a training exercise called Atlantic Resolve. And here to tell us more tonight about Atlantic Resolve, please help me welcome Colonel Paul Kratiger, Commander of the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team, and Colonel Brian Shivers, Commander of the 1st Combat Aviation Brigade.
Don, is it good? Hey, so Holly and I and our units absolutely are excited to be here. And as I was telling the crowd from Salina, would you say 60,000 people? Salina, 48,000? Yeah, right. So, I've been in the Army 24 years, and I tell my parents what I do all the time. And they ask questions and continue to question, like, gosh, have you not figured this out yet? And so, but it's not my parents' life. This is my life, and I don't expect them necessarily to know that. But I think it's important that we're able to tell the public our story, and so this is a way to do so. And many of you guys appreciate certainly the history, the rich history, I think, of Europe. And the military and the Army in particular has had a significant role in that. But it's changed. And I think what myself and Paul are going to tell you about is, how we've gotten from where we are post-World War II to where we are now, and what these approximately 12 soldiers have done to impact that. So I'll turn it over to Paulie with any opening comments, and then we're going to show you a brief video.
Good evening, and so thank you very much for having us here. And as Brian said, I think we have a tremendous opportunity being Big Red 1 soldiers and 1st Infantry Division soldiers at Fort Riley. And I tell this every week as we welcome new soldiers in. I talk about the two towns that really are on either side of Fort Riley, and that being Manhattan and Junction City. And so that's where we have our most, the most of our interaction. But it spans much further than that, and and it's to here, it's north, it's south, and it's just really all over. And I think that the welcome that we get all the time, it's phenomenal, and it's I have never seen it better. And as Brian and I are classmates from West Point, so we've been in the Army for, he said 24 years. I don't want to believe that. I feel like we're much younger than that, but I really do feel that there is not a better community that welcomes us and welcomes us into your homes and into your lives. And so this is a part of, I think it's great. I was talking to Dawn, she, talking about the size and the people that are here. It's perfect. It's a perfect size. We've got a lot of soldiers. We've got a lot of different varying backgrounds of things that we can talk about. And so we'll talk about some slides tonight. We'll do some, we'll lay out some history, and we'll talk about what we did in a mission for our nation, and then at any point we'll answer any questions that you want, or we'll break up and you can feel free to talk to anybody in a uniform. And then the great thing is anytime you want any one of us to come and talk to any organization that you have, we'll do it, and we're happy to tell our story, because I think us telling our story is good for all of us, and it's good for our nation, and it's good for our Army. And so I would ask you, if you think that you've got an opportunity for some of us to come down and engage with you in whatever group you have, we'd love to do it. And so, I again just thank you for having us here. As we talk, we're here at the Eisenhower Library, and so President Eisenhower, who is a commanding general, led soldiers against the Germans in North Africa, Normandy, Berlin. And as a president, sent federal troops to enforce court-ordered integration in Little Rock Central High School. And created a legacy that inspires really all of us, not just to be better soldiers, but to be better people, and I think better citizens. And so what an honor for us to be here tonight and kind of talk with you all and share again our stories and whatever you would like to know about us. We're going to talk about Europe. We're going to talk about what got us into Operation Atlantic Resolve. What I would like to do very quickly, and I'll introduce, and I think Brian will introduce his team, and I'll just ask folks to stand up quickly so that you can see kind of a little smattering of what we brought from our different brigades. So first of all, Captain Jeffrey Lee. So Jeff is from Fairfax, Virginia, has been in the Army for just a little over 8 years as a mechanized infantry company commander, and led about 120 soldiers in Romania and Bulgaria. So Jeff, if you just stand up, turn around, and wave. You don't have, he's not that impressive. Everybody else is pretty impressive. Jeff isn't. So, but I love you, Jeff. And then we've got First Lieutenant Brian Lupton from Callahan, Colorado, and he's been in the Army for about 3 years and he was a platoon leader, so leading 29 combat engineers in Germany and Poland in specialization in construction and deconstruction, or mobility, counter mobility, as we call it inside the Army. So Brian, just Sergeant First Class Kelly Anderson, right over here. So from Erie, Pennsylvania, 16 years in the Army. She's a medic, and during Atlantic Resolve supervised soldiers running the main health clinic that provided a range of services for all of our soldiers, so across seven different nations as you look through it. And then she was, what she really did that was incredibly effective wherever she went was working hand in hand with the hospitals all throughout Eastern Europe. So when we've got some medical care and some capability, but obviously if a soldier gets sick or is injured, something along those lines, they're going to go into a local hospital in Poland and Germany and Romania and Bulgaria. Boy, and you've got to have somebody that can figure that out, who doesn't speak any one of those languages and has to go in and kind of help. And that makes a soldier nervous, that makes mom, dad, sister, brother, spouse back home nervous. And so you had people like Sergeant Anderson that were out there that were helping us to just try and do some great things with medical coverage. Sergeant First Class Adam, So Sergeant First Class Adam Donaldson from Glen Burnie, Maryland, 17 years in the Army, and he is a tank mechanic, so an Abrams tank mechanic. It's 72 tons of awesomeness. So obviously I'm a little biased to that, but and I'm the guy that breaks them, he's the guy that fixes them. But we brought our tanks over and at one point led a tank through a parade in Warsaw, Poland. And so the battalion commander texted me and said, "Who would have thought that I would be driving an American tank in a parade in Warsaw, Poland?" And so, so you've got Sergeant Donaldson who just keeping our combat readiness up and allowing us the ability to fight whenever we needed to. So. And then Staff Sergeant Adam Huntoon from Flint, Michigan, 8 years in the Army. Over here, good-looking Cavalry Scout. So he and I both have spurs on. So we'll tell you stories about that. Most of them will probably not be true, but it's good. So he was a Cavalry Scout squad leader and is part of our reconnaissance and security formation. And so moving, and while he was part of Atlantic Resolve, was part of the troop that was in Hungary, so about 2 hours outside of Budapest. And so I had the tough job of flying in and out of Budapest and having to stay overnight and then go out and see these guys. But doing some great things, again, about 100 soldiers pretty far away from the flagpole in Hungary, where we have no significant presence outside of that cavalry troop. So thanks very much. And then last but not least, Sergeant Isabel Rosa Maria Muña. And so from Saipan in the Northern Mariana Islands, and has been in about 8 years. And Sergeant Muña is a pharmacy technician, and she ran a field medical facility during our training exercises in Poland and Germany. So when you think about, nothing stops when we go somewhere. People still need their medication and something that's prescribed to them. And so one of the things that she did. So from the First Armor Brigade combat team, those are our folks that are here. And I'd ask, when we're done, if there's something that strikes a chord with you that you want to talk with, please feel free to approach them at any point and ask them any question that you'd like to. Brian?
Yeah, so equally, I think what's also significant is you go to a lot of these countries, and I think there is a image of what an American soldier looks like. And what I would tell you is that this is what the American soldier looks like. They come from all walks, all races, all parts of the four corners of the world. And I think that that's somewhat astonishing to particularly some of these European countries that, just have an image of what they think we are and are impressed with by the diversity that we really have, both gender or race or in religion. And that's something that I think is important for us as we go and spread what we as Americans and as we hold very valuable. So my first guest and one of our troopers is First Lieutenant Allie Schweinsfer. She is an attack reconnaissance helicopter pilot. She serves with what I think is really the only true Cav squadron out there anymore. Paulie thinks that it's the tanks, but it's the Apaches that get out there and really get after it. And just a fitness phenom over here. You can see her carrying a 50-pound rucksack any given time, or doing a race in Illesheim, Germany, And there's a great picture that we have in one of our books that has her hugging a German kid as we've done outreach programs. So an example from Clarkson University ROTC program. We're proud to have her really kind of breaking down barriers and getting after it in the Combat Aviation Brigade. My other guest is, My other guest is Corporal Gregory Larsler. Greg, stand up, please. When she breaks, and our Apaches don't have a great reputation for flying. They're great machines, but they're beasts of a maintenance project. Probably on par with the M1 tank. They find a lot of time in the motor pool or the hangar, and we have to have great soldiers like Greg here to really just get after and fix and put I tell a lot of the maintainers, because the pilots get all the glory. I got one here, I got another one right over here, and a company commander, and they think they're just the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they can do whatever they do for about 2 hours. That's what I tell them, 2 hours, and then it requires somebody to fuel them and somebody to fix them. And those guys and gals don't get a lot of the glory. So for our thankless mechanics, we've already had another one out here. A round of applause for him, please. Chief War Officer 4, Jason Green. Please stand up, Jason. I had to look this up. Jason is from the Caribbean island of St. Kitts and Nevis. I think that's 2, but it could be 1. I'm not sure. 2 different islands? Twin Islands. Again, he went to Clarence Fitzroy College and graduated with a degree in motor vehicle engineering, enlisted in the Army originally, and is now a safety officer with our support battalion. And our safety officers, we have school-trained guys, not a lot of other organizations, units do. And Jason not only flies helicopters, but he helps the boss see where risk is and reduce that risk across the formation. And the aviation community, we're on the razor's edge all the time. We're spinning at 25,000 RPM somewhere, some part on that aircraft, and you can lose a finger or a life very quickly. And he helps us to see ourselves. CW2 Colton Walls, a Texas native here, a 153. This is MOS. He's a medevac pilot, and like our medic over here, they've done both real world and lots of training exercises in Europe. And I think, as my boss used to describe to me, being in Afghanistan multiple times, that the difference between the United States and our NATO partners and the terrorists that are there to do ill towards the Afghan people, for example, is we're there to go get our people. We will go in and we will at all costs recover them, and the terrorist organizations, they can't say that, and we do that very well as the United States Army, all due to pilots like Colton here. So round of applause for him, please. My last one is one of my company commanders, Jeremy Martini. Jeremy is a CH-47 pilot. He owns the big, if you've come down I-70 there and look into Marshall Army Airfield, and the first thing you see are 12 beasts of Chinook helicopters. And if you saw it recently, last 2 months, there was nothing there. And it was kind of sad. And then when you come over the hill there and you look and you see, pretty proud of those machines, but more proud of the people that are there to both fight and fix and fuel them. Jeremy's previous assignment to this was flying the Special Mission Wing, partnered with Afghans in Afghanistan. So it takes a lot of courage to do that with an Afghan pilot. Doesn't have a lot of flight time, and to do that as a young officer. So pretty proud of Jeremy and his accomplishments here. So. Did I miss anybody? I hope I didn't. So I think that's where we wanted to introduce the Big Red One soldiers here from the Devil Brigade and the Demon Brigade. For those of you who don't know, call signs have a lineage, and the 1st Infantry Division is Danger. That's our call sign, and all the subordinate units are also, they begin with a D. And so you have the devils, you have the demons, you have dagger, you have durable, you have drumfire, and it's a unique organization as far as a division of the Army. So just a piece of history there. So Matt, if you would roll the HUA video, please.
Don't leave. We'd be lost.
Always AV troubles. Doesn't matter.
We can act this out if we need.
So none of that stock footage. That's all real. That's all these guys and gals and their troopers doing that. So a great rotation to Europe for us. And we're going to paint the picture of kind of what kind of leads to that and why the United States Army and the 1st Infantry Division in particular are doing rotations over to Europe. This is the 3rd one that the division's done. The 2nd Brigade combat team went in 2017, and the 1st Brigade and 1st Combat Aviation Brigade just wrapped one up. So the division and Fort Riley in general has been invested quite a bit in what our country's asked of us in Europe. So with that, Paul, anything before I kick it off? Okay, so how, again, the landscape in Europe in particular has changed quite a bit since our parents and relatives have fought for the security of Europe in general. And so as it applies to the Army, you've seen massive amounts of changes from infrastructure to people to units to how we train over there and why we're over there. And so as we were asked and invited to come do this outreach, we wanted to show and set the foundation. And so Polly said, hey, you're smarter than me, please talk the history piece. You did better. I think I tutored him in history at West Point a little bit. So I drew that straw. Not my forte. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. At least that's what I got a piece of paper in. So I think I got a D in history, to be honest with you. So bear with me. But nonetheless, I'm going to paint the picture of what post-World War II was and the maturation or degradation in our assets has been since really 1940, 44, 45. And then Polly's going to take it over from there and tell kind of what we've done and what our units were doing in Europe and why we're there and the drastic change in kind of numbers. Okay, so I'll start off, and this is the history of our kind of troops in Europe. The Berlin blockade kind of began, as you recall, in June of 1948 when the Soviets blocked the Western Allies, both rail and road access. Headquartered out of Wiesbaden, which we're familiar with over there doing this rotation, they attempted and did, with the Berlin airlift, supply 9,000 tons of supplies per day for nearly a year, 11 months, and that's a pretty astonishing feat until this was lifted in May of 1949. As we advance from the Berlin blockade post 1948 to the 50s, you see the Cold War and particularly the Korean War, and it's starting to warm up with the hostilities in Korea, and it heightened the tensions actually in East and West Europe. The United States activated the 7th Army in Stuttgart, Germany in 1950, and relocated both the 5th and 7th Corps headquarters and 4 divisions for the United States back in Europe. And when we talk forces now, it's not even close to what was there back then. In 1952, we established the United States European Command that is already and is still there, as well as U.S. Army Command, which is still headquartered in Germany. In 1953, the Korean War armistice was signed, and the tensions began to ease in Europe. U.S. Army Europe divisions were thinly manned at approximately 13,500. If you take a typical division now, they're about 20,000. So we didn't put a lot of personnel there, but we had a foothold. We did have marginal equipment upgrades during the 50s, and that included, which I've never even seen, an M48 tank and an M59 armored personnel carrier. We did have tactical nuclear weapons over there, and that was pretty significant. In pop culture, for those that recall, I Love Lucy debuted in 1951, and Elvis recorded at Sun Studios. So you get the heating up of the Cold War, and the Berlin issue arises. It was a problem, Berlin was. It was surrounded by East Germany, and Great Britain, France, United States all had occupied sectors in there. At the time, travel between the sectors was unrestricted. However, when the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev announced in June 1961 that the Soviet Union is planning to conclude a peace treaty, about 3,000 refugees a day flowed from what was East Germany into the sectors of West Germany. At that point, August 12th, the Soviets suddenly closed the border and began constructing the Berlin Wall, isolating the 3 western sectors of eastern Germany. In response, the U.S. deployed an additional armored cavalry regiment to Europe, along with additional units, and our strength was at a high of 277,000 people in 1962. Of course, the Vietnam era, I think Matt's pulling that up. The communication zone moved from Orleans, France to Worms, Germany, and the European Command relocated to Stuttgart. The first large-scale deployment of forces began in '68 with removal. This is where you start seeing people kind of decreasing, about 28,000 personnel from Germany. However, with the withdrawal of units, the personnel remained committed to NATO, and in January of '69, the military forces executed a series of reforger forces returning to Germany. And that's significant because right now we're doing Defender 20, and it harkens back to what we did back in the mid-'60s, bringing troops and flowing them into Europe to show that we can. In the 70s, U.S. Army Europe continued to improve its firepower. You saw the improvements of the M16 rifle, tow missiles, OH-58 observation helicopters, since then retired Cobra helicopters, and the U.S. Army, kind of Europe's forces continued to take a hit as we were flowing people into Vietnam. In '74, efforts to streamline the headquarters resulted in the termination of a U.S. Theater Army Support Command. It was eventually reflagged to the 21st Theater Army Area Command, and as these guys and gals know now, that is again reduced and reflagged as the 21st Theater Support Command. So that kind of takes us to terrorism that we have dealt a lot with now as Army forces rotating through Iraq and Afghanistan, but really kind of kicked off in the 70s and 80s. During the 70s, force protection concerns grew as various groups conducted terror operations targeting U.S. facilities in Europe with bombings, kidnappings, assassinations, and in May of '72, there were bombs exploded in the 5th Corps headquarters in Frankfurt, killing an Army lieutenant and simultaneously killing 3 soldiers in Heidelberg, Germany. U.S. installations were attacked sporadically throughout the remainder of the decade, including failed attacks in 1977 in an Army base in Gießen. In '85, some of you may recall, a soldier was lured out of Wiesbaden nightclub and killed for his ID card, which the ID card was then used to gain access to Rhine-Main Air Base, and that person was then able to detonate a couple of bombs, killing 2. So you see that we have concerns and how we're dealing with our presence and what we're attempting to do in Europe when the terrorism kind of kicks off. In the 80s, significant planning efforts focused on deterring a communist attack that led to increased numbers of combat troops in Europe. You had simultaneous wide-ranging of modernization efforts that included really the advent of about 400 different systems, including weapons, different field rations. Pauley's M1 Abrams tanks then becomes an actual item that's in a weapon system that's employed significantly. M2 and M3 Bradley systems, the UH-60 Black Hawk, and Apache helicopter. Those are also known as the Big Five in modernization efforts that we're still fighting. And you'll hear talks in our Army leadership of futures and getting new systems out there because since the 70s we're fighting the same equipment. Okay, so modernization efforts are very important to us. As we conclude the 80s and get into the 90s, you're aware that in August of 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The first deployments from U.S. Army Europe to Saudi Arabia included much of the 45th Medical Company, 12th Aviation Brigade that was over there. And by the time Desert Storm concludes, the U.S. Army Europe had eventually deployed up to 75,000 people, 1,200 tanks, 1,700 armored combat vehicles, and 325 helicopters. So at the beginning of the 90s, Europe was a staging base for operations in the Middle East. So in 92, about 70,000 soldiers redeployed from Europe to the United States. Significant to this, and a lot of our occupation in foreign countries, 90,000 family members redeployed too. The command shrank from approximately 213,000 soldiers in Europe to 122,000. Infrastructure went from 850 installations in 1990 down to 415, and they're still decreasing today. Some of the barracks we stayed in over there were headquarters that had been mothballed and opened back up for our use. And in the 90s, the command was engaged in lots of humanitarian support operations to include disaster relief and rescue and recovery and peacekeeping operations in the Balkans. That kind of advances us to 9/11 and up to current times. But following the 2001 terrorist attacks on the towers, the U.S. Army Europe became what I had already described as a logistics hub for operations in both Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2010, and Paulie's, he cringes with this because all tank formations had been transitioned to striker formations. And just to be honest, not that menacing of a platform compared to a big tank. So I say that in seriousness because now you'll see the Devil Brigade go over, and there's a reason for that. In 2014, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula in the Ukraine, and that really kind of set in motion why and the need for rotational forces to come back. So at some point, we went from 2.4 million people in Europe post World War II. We peaked at around 350,000 people, and we are down now to somewhere around 45,000 people. And so you can see the footprint, and Polly will show a map here, that the Europe we had was a lot smaller than the Europe that we are now trying to help secure. So that brings us to modern day Atlantic Resolve. And today, as U.S. Army Europe engages allies throughout 51 countries, we do this via combined exercises and security cooperation partnerships. And since April 2014, U.S. Army Europe has led land force efforts for Atlantic Resolve, which demonstrates our commitment, the U.S. commitment, to our NATO allies. These multinational training and security cooperation activities are taking place in places we previously weren't: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary. Now, these training events improve both the interoperability and strengthen relationships and trust among our allied partners. So, in conclusion for me, fighting multinational is a massive challenge. You'd have obviously the language barrier, but at the end of the day, it's the relationships that I think are created. And so when we and these troopers are over there doing these rotations and multinational training exercises, I think it's ultimately the relationships that we're building and the values that we're projecting from a United States standpoint. So I'll turn it over to Polly. That's kind of the history background from a mechanical engineer, and he will take us through to what OAR is now.
So the reason that I'm smarter is because I got him to do that. So just so we all understand the playing field. So what I think is interesting about this slide, if you'll just look behind it, so if you look on my right and your left in 1989, and you see the Soviet Union. So pre-wall coming down, and you see everything that is either part of the Soviet Union or somehow they have control over. And then when you come to the right in 2020, what Brian has done is we have talked about the reduction of troops for all sorts of different reasons. And I think there are political reasons. There are reasons that that you may or may not agree with. But we have seen a significant shrink of our troops, of U.S. soldiers, inside of Europe, and since the Berlin blockade. And then what we are looking at, so that is tied as we have gone down with troops. We have now seen some of the audacity of what Russia is doing. And what we saw in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea turned us in to what we would execute now called Atlantic Resolve. And so if you look onto the right-hand side here in 2020 where we're executing, so we won't talk all of these pieces because not all of this is part of where the United States have forces. So NATO forces, we are operating throughout all of these regions here. But as you look at the map, so we're in Germany, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and then all sorts of different places in between. And then we have allies, NATO allies, working in Norway, Italy, down in Greece, and actually we now have some of the combat aviation. So one of the last things that Brian and his team did was place elements of the Combat Aviation Brigade in Greece, and so now the elements from the 3rd Combat Aviation Brigade from the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia, are there in Greece. And so it's interesting, and I think just the juxtaposition of where we weren't in 1989 and where we are now in 2020 and who we're working with. And so, the thing, there will be, as we kind of move through this, I think there will be a question, and a lot of times, and rightfully so, it's our soldiers that question, why are we there? Why are we here? What are we doing? Because, we're not fighting like we are in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or some other place, but what we are doing is, and we're doing a lot of things that we would call day-to-day operations here at Fort Riley, Fort Hood, any place that you go in the United States, in a CONUS base, a continental United States Army base, that's what you would see us doing. And so soldiers will ask, and people ask, well, why are you doing that in Europe? And I think we'll talk about some assurance and some deterrence, but I think the most important thing that we do is we build relationships. And that is going to carry us as a nation. It's going to carry us as a world for the foreseeable future, in my opinion. So if we could, so what Brian and I would like to do, and then I will ask any of the folks that are in uniform if there's something as we're going to talk through about 4 or 5 slides, and then we'll open it up to any questions. If you'd like to ask a question while we're talking through this, I would highly encourage you to just stop, raise your hand, and say, can you explain it? Explain something to us, and either myself or Brian or anyone out here wearing a uniform is going to help answer that question. So, we talk about assurance and deterrence. So that's really when somebody says, why Atlantic Resolve? Well, we're there to assure our allies and deter our foes. And I think, the one I go back to this quote, and it talks about credibility. And so it says, we can't assure our allies if they don't believe we will fight. So we're there. We're there with them. We're there training. We spend a lot of our time, money, blood, and sweat, and some tears, I'm sure, that go over there to train with our partners. And so we are assuring them, and I think they believe that we will fight. And that is absolutely paramount. And probably even more importantly is we can't deter our adversaries if they don't believe that we can win. And so we have to be an army that goes over and shows our might, and shows we are here to fight and win the nation's wars, our nation's wars. And a lot of what we want to do is not go and fight those wars. And so if you can deter that, I think we have done much better if deterrence comes through this instead of us having to go and fight someplace. So as you look at this, just a couple of photos. You've got the 72-ton death sled up there in the upper left-hand corner. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm sure, but I love the flying helicopters, and so I love the Army. But you just see what our soldiers are doing, and so on a day-to-day basis, our soldiers are training, and so we're training organically. So as a United States force, as the as the Devil Brigade Combat Team, or the Demon Combat Aviation Brigade, or we are integrating some force from some country across the board into our training. And so we are building that relationship, or those relationships that will become necessary when and if we have to go fight inside of Europe. And so, just kind of a little bit of things of what we're doing, but we're doing a lot of great training, and it's an opportunity for our soldiers to do not only this great training here, but to do it with some folks that we don't normally do it. And I think one of the things that we have learned is, in the past, you've got probably at least a generation of soldiers that have gone to Iraq and Afghanistan, and we say, you need to build that army, build the Iraqi army, build the Afghan police, do this, and we'll call it partnering, but really what it is it's building it from the ground up. These partners, by and far, they are our allies, and so a lot of these countries do not need our help in how they execute operations. But the way that we do that, how we talk, how we plan, how we execute together becomes, as Brian said, it's significant. And there's a lot of boundaries there, whether language is just one of those. But it's incredibly important because we're going to go somewhere and we're going to show up on the same battlefield and we're going to fight with these people. And so we build that relationship so it's a peer-to-peer relationship, which I think is very important for us as we go through and look at this, versus something that we have done in the past as we go to a different place where maybe the maturity level of that formation is not as high. And so, one of the things I talk about, logistics and sustainment, Brian kind of hit this. Hey, I'm a tanker. I like to shoot, big guns. We have infantrymen, we have field artillery folks, and so we talk about shooting a lot. And I remind all those people that you're good for, however long that is, 2 hours, that's probably a good shot. And then you run out of fuel and you run out of ammunition. And very important to me, you run out of food, And so if you don't have that logistical support tail that is there to help provide for you, then you're just not going to make it. And it doesn't matter how big, bad, and brave, bold you are, you're not going to make it. And so from what we have heard from our, as folks look at this feedback from, whether it's Russians or their allies, what they see is when the United States shows up with the logistical tail, that's when we mean business. And so as we talk, Brian's talked a little bit about Defender 2020. It's an operation that's going to really start here in earnest in April and go for several months in Europe. But that's us moving about 4 divisions worth of equipment all across Europe. And that is showing our, again, it's showing it's the assurance to our allies and it's the deterrence to our foes. But really, when you start packing ships, and we railed our tanks and Bradleys over 180 missions throughout Eastern Europe and Eastern Europe. We used barges as we came in and deployed into country. We drove our equipment on the Autobahn, so you name it, and we got it there in one form where everyone could see it. And that is significant. And then when we left out of there, so in the upper left-hand corner, you see that the huge Green Ridge ship. So that's going out of Gdynia in Poland. And so we left out of 3 different ports. So one in Constantia, down in Romania, and then Gdynia in Poland, and then Bremerhaven in Germany. And so just showing the might and the ability of our Army, really driven by that the sustainment force that we have, is significant, and it's significant to our foes.
I think we talked about it the other day, that the preparation to what we get out of this rotation. We've done a lot of falling in on stay-behind equipment in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's the smart thing to do. You don't have to haul it over multiple times. But there's a skill set there that our troopers don't get. That they think that we just pack containers and get our personal equipment and effects over there, and that's a deployment. And we haven't done something like this for years. And so I was surprised when I took command in Europe this July and coming back, the time frame that it would be for us to uncoil, to get our stuff back from the port of Beaumont and get it up in here on rail at Fort Riley and then account for all. It took like 2 months. And I just didn't have the appreciation that I did when we first went to Iraq in 2003, the last time I'd actually loaded ships and folded the helicopters and sent them over there en masse. And so this rotation to Europe really gives us an opportunity to do that, which is a significant part of getting there. It's not just being ready, but it's pushing it out, doing so quickly, and then as Paulie said, sustaining that force over there, being able to do so is something that no other country can do. We project that combat power, and that in itself is a massive deterrence. We can get there via sea, we can get there via air, we can get there via land if we have to. And when we say we're gonna, and I think that to be able to project it here in the pictures you see is a significant deterrence.
And I think what you see, and the great thing, so as you drive down, whether it's 70 and you get to see the trains coming sometime with the loaded tanks or Bradley. So our Dagger Brigade, the 2nd Brigade Armored Combat Team, is leaving to go to Korea, and their equipment left probably about 3 weeks ago, I think. I think they were trying to figure out the timing on it, so it was when there was some heightened tension in Iran, and no one wanted to think that we were loading up tanks to go to Iran, so they sent it out in the middle of the night. But an Armored Brigade combat team is going to send somewhere around 4,000 soldiers and 5,000 pieces of equipment. And so, as you think about all of that and where that has to go, so from train to Beaumont, Texas, from Beaumont, Texas onto a boat into anywhere else in the world, and then we're going to land that and then go. It is significant, and I think that it's an amazing sight for I think for all of us to see, to include just the soldiers to really step back and see what a combat aviation brigade looks like, or what an armor brigade combat team looks like, and really what we bring to the fight. And so that's helpful for us to see, and then it's absolutely helpful for our allies as we go forward. So just a few pictures. We've got some great stuff, and Brian can talk about what we had, or what he did as we kind of came out of our last bit of the deployment. We went to Germany, to Hohenfels, to the Joint Readiness Training Center, or JMRC, Joint Multinational Readiness Center, I've been there a couple times and they keep changing the names on me. So we had 11 partner nations that went through that rotation. So about a 9-day rotation of force on force, fighting, in a laser tag type world with all your tanks and stuff. But, so we had an infantry battalion from Slovakia. So an entire infantry battalion of about 700 Slovakians came in and integrated with us. And so we had, and so when you talk 11 partner nations to come in and the relationship that you build. So that was our last piece, but even more importantly was about the 7 or so months prior to that, where we sat in Poland, sat in Georgia, sat in Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and then built additional relationships that again, we will codify over the future. Anything that you want to
Yeah, so Jeremy's group here, we did a series of air assaults from Italy all the way back over to Bulgaria, and it took about 3 weeks to a month to do that. And so from Croatia, convoying across all of Central Europe, and then flying different places with different customers was outstanding. So, Jeremy, I'd like to what did you get out of your CSEC operation and being able to integrate multinational forces? You can go right there.
Do we need to use the microphone for this?
Either way, if you
Or-
want to.
So yes, sir. Speaking about CSAC, so it originated in Italy, and the planning started with the 173rd. So we did airborne operations, and then we did what's called a joint forcible entry exercise into Croatia. So we got to work with our NATO allies in Croatia, who are extremely hospitable. It's a great training area there in Croatia. So basically, they opened up a very large portion of the countryside for us to do these operations, which greatly built upon the readiness of my unit, and then the 173rd Airborne as well. So, and then speaking about Bulgaria, so in Bulgaria we went to the what's called the Novo Selo training area, where we were working with the 82nd Airborne, but we also had the Canadians that came over as well. So they participated in the joint forcible entry exercise, and we did what is called a CALFEX, which is a combined arms live fire exercise. So just working on air assault operations, which is my unit's essentially primary task, and we got to work with those NATO allies and to go back with what they discussed. So what is key with this rotation of Operation Atlantic Resolve is just building these habitual relationships with our NATO allies. What we call interoperability, essentially just marrying up both of our standard operating procedures and establishing a common language so we can effectively do missions together. So.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So again, kind of talking about the strengthening of partnerships and who you're going to run into and what you get to. So I think you learn to bond with someone, and sometimes the language is a barrier, and sometimes it's not. But most of the time you figure it out, and so there's in Poland. Oftentimes, I'd ask somebody a question. They say, "Oh, well, you just use the Google Translator. You can do that." And then you'll find there's a kid in your formation that speaks Polish, or there's always someone. Every country that we worked with, there was always at least one, usually many more, that could speak English, and all they wanted to do was just kind of hone their skills, their English skills, and talk with our soldiers. And so that's it's pretty amazing as we go. And so you just see some of the countries that we get to work with here.
Hey, so tell the 4-star Polish relationship that then Colonel Brooks had. I think it's important.
Yeah. So there is our deputy commander here is a guy named Phil Brooks. So he did this. What we commonly refer to this mission as a RAF mission, and a rotational force over to a rotationally aligned force. And so Colonel Brooks was one of the first guys to go over to Europe and execute this RAF force. And so he was partnered immediately with the commander of the 11th Armored Cavalry Division, Polish, and so it's a two-star general, much just like General Kolishevsky, who's our commanding general here. And so he made that relationship. Now, Colonel Brooks, I come back in what Colonel Brooks' capacity was a while back. Colonel Brooks comes back as my boss, as the forward commander over there, and that gentleman that had been the division commander is now one of the senior most generals in the Polish army, a guy named General Mika. And so it was pretty amazing to see that relationship. And so, Colonel Brooks got called to Warsaw all the time because General Mika just really liked him. But he also gave him, what Brooks, there was a relationship there that allowed General Mika to get something from Colonel Brooks in a way that he couldn't get from anyone else on his staff or any other American. Same thing happened with, there's a guy named Brigadier General Nori that's over in Germany, and so he was the first guy. Nori was the first guy, and Brooks was the second guy. So Nori, I was telling him, well, hey sir, I'm partnered with this guy named Stanislav Chosnik, and so he's about a 7-foot tall major general in the Polish commander of the 11th Armored Cavalry Division, Polish. And I said, that's my partner. And he said, well, that guy was my partner when I was here, and he was in a different job. And he said, you just tell him I said hi. And I told General Chosnik that, and it was, oh my God, you have to tell Chris to come see me. I can't believe, And but again, and so when we went and operated in Germany, you've got General Chosnik looking for General Nori, and then General Chosnik, who also knows General Brooks, and then just this relationship that is phenomenal. And I think it's neat that both of those gentlemen, and whether it was by chance or it was by doing from our army, putting those gentlemen back into Europe at a critical time when you've got some senior leadership inside of an allied NATO force that we're working with, and they've got kind of an in to be able to discuss. I think that's a great thing, and that's that should be and can happen at every level. And so I think we did that well in some cases, and not as well as we could in others. But it's and I learned that a long time ago when I was stationed in Germany, and I partnered with German forces, and we didn't ever really do a whole lot of training together, but we drank a lot of beer and ate a lot of schnitzel and had fun. But I knew those people and they knew me, and we established a relationship. So I knew if we had to fight, we trusted each other.
I think that's the point, and that these troopers here at some point, 5 years, 10 years down the line, will have that same relationship that Paulie just described with our counterparts, whatever country they're from, and that's what's going to carry the day, no doubt. And it's a great investment to do on the personal and interpersonal level. One challenge with what we're describing with regard to trying to build that partnership and doing so either on duty or off duty is it's sometimes in competition with actual training. So you got to be careful with how much you want to just put one Apache helicopter in a Latvian air show, because that's not getting me collective readiness. My Apache platoon leader needs to be maneuvering 4 Apaches and or learning how to fight a company's worth of Apaches. And so I don't like her sitting down and having schnitzel as much or drinking beer with the Poles when that costs me readiness. So there's a fine line of building partners and creating those relationships, but also being focused on readiness. And frankly, when you're in Europe, they want you to do that. The European command wants you to build those partners. Yet we come back from Forces Command and they expect you to go to Germany and train your butt off and come back. And so that, as me and Paulie as brigade commanders just really have to meter those 2 requirements.
Good. Next. So one of the things, just some of the soldier experiences. I highlight this because it's, so I spent 4 years over there as in Germany. It was phenomenal. I traveled every opportunity I could and saw things that I would never been afforded the opportunity to go and do and see had I not been stationed there. And so this is a great opportunity for our soldiers and the ability, and some love to get out and go and do great things. Some don't, and I don't understand why that is. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight in this is just as you look at our soldiers, we've got a lot of soldiers. I spoke, I guess it was 2 weeks ago at a retirement ceremony on Fort Riley, and there were 18 retirees that we honored that day, and 3/4 of them are staying in Kansas or retiring in Kansas. And then we've got a lot of soldiers that leave the service after a first term, maybe a second term of being in the Army, and they stay in Kansas because they like it. And so this is a paid non-political announcement, but an announcement from me of these are some phenomenal young soldiers, and you'll get to talk to them here in a couple minutes, that have seen the world, that have done things in defense of our nation, that have executed a mission that was asked of them, and then they've gone and just have a different perspective on life that was afforded to them because of the Army and because of the experience that they had. And so when you think about it, when you engage young soldiers, there's and sometimes you may have to ask some questions that drive to them because they may not realize all the great things that they've done. But there's some greatness here with our soldiers and the ability and what they provide inside our communities and inside different jobs and things along those lines. And so I would say, be proud of these soldiers because they go and they represent us very well, whether it's in the mission, on duty or off duty. They're doing some great representation of us. I think do you have anything on?
No.
Yep. So the last slide we have here, and then we'll transition. Just incredibly important to me. So I'm a husband, and I am a father of 2 daughters, 10 and 12. And so the most difficult thing that I do is leave home and leave my daughters and my wife. But once I am gone, my life becomes very focused. And our lives as soldiers become very focused because you have a mission and you don't have the ability, you can't go home. You know where you're at, you know what you need to do. And so I will tell you that the people that, if you think that soldiers have it tough, look at the families. And the families are the ones who pay the biggest price. And so, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, when we're gone for 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, however long it is, there's a family of some way, shape, or form that's waiting back there. And so, I would tell you, we do this, but all of this is not without cost. And I think it's significant cost to our families. And so I just always like to talk and tell that side of the story because I think there's a lot of people that want to, hey, thanks for your service and pat you on the back. But really, the things go to our families and the people that support us so that we can do this mission. Now, all that being said, some of the wonderful things that I learned. So I came to Fort Riley, never been to Fort Riley before. I got here, and 2 days later, I was on a plane to Poland where I took command, and then I came back on Halloween, and I got to a house that I had never seen the inside of it before, and my wife had moved our daughters there and had gotten everything set. I asked where my socks were, and my wife said, all of your stuff is down in the boxes down in the basement, and you can figure that out because I did the rest of this house. And I said, horse dear, thank you very much. But what I found was, she said, this is a great place. She said, we love it here, our girls love it here, we love the school. And what I found, as I kind of started off saying, was this is a community like I had never seen. And it's an amazing place that we tell soldiers, hey, when you come back, there's a lot of people that care about you. And so, as we transition into any questions that you want to talk about, there's a thanks for us, and so I hope I'm sure that you are proud of the soldiers that are out here that are with us. I'm sure that you are proud of the things that they do, that our nation asks them to do, and they go and they do it, and I have never seen, it is amazing the autonomy that we give our soldiers, and rightfully so, but the autonomy to go and act on our behalf as a nation in a foreign country it's amazing and it's wonderful. And so, as we come here, I just thank you for being here tonight. We thank you for any discussion that you want to have, and we really thank you for inviting us and allowing us to tell part of our story. So, Brian, anything?
No, I think it's probably time to open it up for questions here. Again, it's been our pleasure On behalf of General Kolashevsky and all of the 1st Infantry Division. But thanks for having us, and I hope to address and create a relationship and answer certain questions here tonight. But thanks.
Are there any questions?
Hopefully I say her name right. Is Connie correcting?
Cradiger, yep.
Yeah,
The good-looking one. If you're talking to the good-looking one, Cradiger. That's, yep.
yeah, I agree. I tremendously appreciate everything you did in your presentation, and brings out a good memory when my husband and I were stationed in Germany, and I worked with DoD myself. But what I most appreciate from your comment was you are really appreciating your family, your wife. Thus, I always wanted to bring that side of the story for military dependence. When my husband was deployed to Kosovo and Bulgaria, Romania, and Afghanistan, sometimes it's about 9 months, sometimes a couple months. Even though I'm working full time with the soldiers side by side, that was the most difficult time of my life. I have a sleep deprivation, eating disorder, and then a lot of times, even though we are living in military community, they don't appreciate other side of sacrifice. So when you mentioned that, I tremendously appreciate that. So thank you so much for recognizing your family sacrifice while you are serving with the nation.
So I appreciate your comments, and I was going to dogpile on what Polly had said, and the difference between what we call a combat deployment and this deployment. It's no different in the terms of time and the sacrifice and separation from families, and so it particularly rankles us when you're in Europe in particular as a rotational force, and people are like, well, you're not in Afghanistan or you're not in Iraq. It doesn't matter. Tell that to, I'm a father of 5, so tell that to my 4-year-old, and he doesn't get it. He doesn't care. He just knows that we're gone. And so that's just one example that all these folks go through. And so this, keeping it specific to OAR, it's a deployment. And we tell our family it's a deployment. And I tell our soldiers that it's a deployment because of those sacrifices that are left back here. And for Polly's wife to not unpack his socks, he did something to deserve that, I guarantee it. Thanks.
I wonder if you could name the enemy that you're fighting over there. Is it from a certain country or a people group, or who is the enemy that you're fighting mostly now?
No, Polly gets that one. Hey, so it's there's no secret. It is the Russian aggression is where we the Crimea piece was what really kind of solidified this particular operation. And so when you see the encroachment, when you see some of the other countries like the Ukraine being just their values and their, it's kind of getting into politics, but their sovereignty, really stretched. That's where you're going to see some action from the United States, and so it's from the east, and Russia is the specific one, to be honest.
Are you fighting the Muslims as well? Because the Muslims are in there and they don't fight anybody. So
I don't think, that's, we're kind of getting into the political piece there, but anything that is, I think challenges our NATO partners, European security, is what we're kind of trying to get over there and, stop.
I think that as we look at this goes back to, we have fought in all sorts of different fronts and types of formations, and so this is kind of back into the nation state, and Russia is at the forefront of that. And so it's that annexation of Crimea, that's what led to this, so we saw all of our, the reduction of troops, and then, at that point, I think what we have done with this kind of assurance and deterrence piece, and what we've done is we have placed a what we would call a sizable element with respect to the rest of the world, or the entire U.S. Army or the entire Russian Army, not significant by any means, but we have placed a U.S. base and a U.S. soldier in the decision-making cycle of Russia before they try and do something again. And I think that is significant for Russia, and then for, most importantly, our allies, as we assure them that we are there.
Good, tough question.
Well, thank you for this great presentation. I was an Air Force brat, and lived on Guam, by the way, by Saipan, when I was a 4th and 5th grader. Graduated from Frankfurt American High School, go Eagles. And I ended up being stationed over there in the late 60s. So, but the mission today is very different than when I was there at headquarters, U.S. Air Force Europe. And I think now all of these soldiers are diplomats for the U.S. You're I don't know how many countries the military is in. It's
Yeah,
over 100 countries.
51 is what,
51,
yeah.
so and I think the one-on-one relationships that they develop with these counterparts that they're going to then meet up with again in a few years, and so it's really a great gratitude to them, and it's an important thing that they're doing for our country. And the professionalism of the officer corps is so outstanding. We've had seminars here at the Eisenhower Library where people from Fort Leavenworth have come and done reenacted the D-Day thing, and our archivists are just amazed at the knowledge and the historical knowledge and the skill and the intelligence of the officer corps. So and the troops. And we go to. I'm retired military. I was 5 years active duty and then 25 years in the reserves. But so we go to Fort Riley, go to the commissary and the post exchange, and just seeing the troops there in the food court. Just seeing the partnerships, people at the tables, and the force from all parts of the country and everything. It's just it's so impressive, and they're making good citizens out of these people. And it's I remember coming through the guard post one day, and it was snowy, cold. The soldier out there, duty first. I said, "Thank you. How are you doing?" He said, "Living the dream, sir." Had a great attitude, but thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah, no doubt. These soldiers are absolute ambassadors, and when they go out there, the comments we get from allied partners, whether it's the Ukrainians, the Romanians, the Bulgarians you're training with, their leaders come to us, countless, and want to say, "Hey, I want to recognize this soldier. This soldier trained and taught this individual. This non-commissioned officer really kind of showed us about troop leading procedures." And so I couldn't tell you how many times in my tenure in Atlantic Resolve where a partnered country went out of their way, and you welcome it, to stop a particular training event and recognize one of your soldiers because they feel that thankful that we've imparted a little bit of our knowledge, a little bit of our values on them. And so absolutely echo the comment of that every person is a diplomat. And sometimes that can bite you. Sometimes we don't represent very well. And that too is, I think, important when the German hosts see how we deal with a particular indiscretion or bad decision. That too solidifies kind of our partnership with them, that we are good guests and that they trust us to deal with poor decisions in a proper manner. So good or bad, they are opportunities to show what the United States is about.
We didn't have any acts of indiscretion, so
That's right.
So I think, was there, okay. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask an operational specific question about your mission over there. You had mentioned, or one of the gentlemen mentioned, training at Novosello, and I was just curious from a personal background experience.
From the guy who's been there.
Actually, I was a project officer and one of the many people involved in raising that up from the dirt. And one of the interesting incidents that happened while we were trying to build that place was the operations officer, I forgot his name, one-star general at USER headquarters. He had, when he came in, he was totally against it, where the previous one was all for it and had gotten the ball rolling and getting it built. And I was just curious because one of the comments he made was he has no use for it. He can take all of his troops and go train over at Hohenfels or somewhere. So I was just curious from your experience, because I haven't been back there for 10, 12 years now. So did it work for you? Was it? I know it's small, and I think that was one of the downsides of it, was considered small. So I was just curious how it worked for your operations.
You want to? So Jeff Lee, Alpha Company, 116 Infantry. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that, and then I'll fill in if there's anything else.
Yeah, so Novosello is a great area. It's probably a little bit different than what it was back when you were there, sir. A lot of new facilities. We're definitely pouring a lot more, into building up the facility. In terms of the partnership aspect, so I think it's probably a little bit similar to what you experienced. There is a tank battalion that is stationed right next to Novosello, and so, but we didn't have a habitual relationship to train with them. We shared the same land with them, but the Bulgarians that we partnered with more were, during specific exercises on Novosello, which I think Captain Martin was a part of one of them in the summer. We would, for example, we had a company that would go and work for a Bulgarian battalion that came in and provided the mission command to conduct a specific exercise. So day to day, I think it was hard to kind of get what we wanted to do aligned with what they wanted to do, so that we can see each other every day. But there were specific exercises planned throughout the year where we can get together, train, and one of the exercises we did, for example, there's a company of tanks coming in from Greece. There were, different nations from Eastern Europe that came in under the command of a Bulgarian battalion and conducted training out there in that very small bowling alley of a training area that you probably remember. So it was an interesting experience for sure.
I think, and so Jeff is, commander down there, so 116 Infantry minus, so one of their companies was up in Bulgaria, or what is it? Romania, thank you. And but so what you really had was a company commander that, when he wasn't doing some training with a host nation or someone else from another nation, they had access to Novosello. And however big or small you think it is, for a company level commander to be able to have that and be able to really define your training, it was amazing. And that goes back to the autonomy. I went down there and right after I had taken command, and Jeff and one of his sister company commanders took me out and kind of drove me through the range and talked to me about some of the training that they had done, and I just said, wow, I couldn't even fathom having the opportunity to do that. We place so many stipulations on training here, and then just to be able to get those guys over there, and they get to plan their training, and the only thing you have to do is it safe, and you stamp it safe, and then you get to do that. And so that, so the relationship, great for what Jeff and some of his peers got and some of his soldiers, but then on the flip side, what he learned as a company commander that he'll take for the rest of his time in the Army is unmatched. And so that will, his approach to training, his ability to look at and train his soldiers, that is an opportunity again that just a lot of folks won't get. So I don't know if that answered all of what you, but okay.
Yeah, so from an aviation perspective, we had a battalion headquarters in Romania at MK, and we would come over oftentimes in support of the 116 fellows or Bulgarian Special Forces, and you were able to do door gunnery over there regularly. That's where we qualified an entire battalion's worth of assault aircraft. I had troops of Apaches come out there with their Shadow, organic Shadow UAVs. You're able to laze. You're able to shoot. You shot missiles out there, did you? You're able to fire rockets and 30 millimeters. And so it's a very good. We call it a bowling alley. It looks just like that. It's a large valley, or narrow, however you look at it, but great for you shooting rockets and shooting. 30 millimeter cannons. So, but a good opportunity for everybody. And we built up a great facilities there. It's got a great chow hall there. So I think worth the investment as far as where we station our people and have access to the facilities to enable our readiness and partnerships.
I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
So you did well. You did great.
Yeah.
From your talks, I gather that you feel that the image of the U.S. is strong in Europe and good. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, you know what, Paulie, I'll take a stab. So, we're largely our aviation brigade was headquartered in Illesheim, Germany, in the Bavaria area of Germany. We had our Cav squadron of Apaches in Poland, and then we had a battalion in Romania, and some in Latvia, and then eventually Greece. And I'll just give you an example. Here, Paulie's guys are firing gunnery over a beam abalina. So if you hear, oftentimes, the big booms going on, we call that the sound of freedom. And a lot of folks, you don't get complaints here. Very, very few do we get. At least I don't probably have fly friendly. But in Germany, you do. In Poland, we started getting some of those complaints. And so I think they have appreciated a certain way of life that doesn't necessarily have what I will call the sound of freedom and the readiness sounds out there. And so I think that's a small portion of a particular country or group of people that is just going to cause problems for you. They don't want you there. They're going to leverage the sound, for example, to make it hard. But by and large, the majority from the port of Rotterdam, where we pushed out of, Constanta, the outpouring of support for what we're doing there. And they recognize the partnership too. They really do. So I would say that it's not without some negativity, but by and large, the United States and the United States Army in particular is well received.
Go ahead.
No, sure. I think Brian hit it right there.
Thank you. And then the other question I would ask you is our U.S. military strong enough? Are we lacking in building military, or got plenty of military? What's your comments on that?
I think first and foremost, what so I'm going to say I would like a larger military, just so there's more opportunity for Brian because he's probably not going to make it much further unless you really open the Army up. But I think what we have to do is have a significant conversation of what do we want as a nation to be doing, and if we want to continue doing what we are doing now, then we should significantly look at the size of our military and whether or not we can support what our nation is asking us to do. I think so that's kind of maybe a bit of a longer term piece. I think, and Brian alluded to this. He talked about the top 5. The tanks that I am on are 30 years old. So when I was a captain, I went to a briefing, and there was a guy that said, "Hey, in 2015, these guys are going to be on hover tanks shooting rail guns." Right? I'm on the same tank that I've been on. Now we've got some different variants, and we've got some more things on it, and it's good, but it's the same tank. And so I think our Army is really focused on modernization, and that's got to be a priority. And so whether there'll be people that say, well, you should have known this or whatever it is, but I think we've been fighting some wars that the Army didn't ask to fight, the nation told us to fight, and we've kind of skipped a couple of generations of improving and modernizing our force. And so when you think about that, that's a significant, when you go back to an industrial revolution, if you miss a generation of that, and I think we probably missed 2, fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan, and doing some other things, and it's come at the cost of our equipment that we have. And so right now, what we're trying to do as an Army is balance modernization and execution of the mission that we have to do. And we can't you can't do one or the other, and we've got to figure out how to do both, and it's going to be difficult. And so I think that's where we've got, it's important to take care of the Army and equipment wise, and equipment absolutely, soldiers first and foremost, but we've got to modernize ourselves if we are going to remain relevant.
Yeah, and so Paulie hit on the last piece there, that we're going to put some significant and have to investment into modernizing our fleets. We have some great, the M model Blackhawk, the Fox model Chinook, the Echo model Apache are all the latest and greatest variants. They're the latest and greatest variants. We're going to have to get the next, whatever it is, not a variant. But it's the people. And so the investment that we and our Chief of Staff currently is doing in the Army, it wanes sometimes, but where we speak and say our priorities are, but it is fundamentally our people. And that's where we are investing heavily, both in our training, both in our quality of life systems, because you might enlist a soldier, but you retain a family. And so when you don't do those and our priorities get out of whack, and we are all about modernizing or all about readiness, and we lose sight of really what we call a pacing item, that system in your motor pool or hangar that is most important to you, you forget that the true pacing item is these soldiers out here, that's when I think that you've got it wrong. And so I think we have that right. We've taken care of our people. We're taking care of our families. We proportionally have both readiness and the modernization efforts out there. So that's a fuzzy answer to your question, but truthfully, it depends. We're going to do what the country asks us to do, and that changes. Sometimes you get a piece of it, and sometimes you grow it. But we're going to be the most ready. We're going to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of the awesome equipment that the American people has paid for us. And we owe you. We're accountable to the community, to our country, to give you the most value for our security. So I hope that kind of answers it. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to personally thank each and every one of you for the service you do to our veterans, sacrifice you give for yourself and our family.
It's my honor. So that's, and I think. So I think we're at the end. You want to cut us off? So what I will tell you, and then you can say whatever you want. Again, thank you all for coming. Thanks for the questions. and we are going to stick around, so if there is anything that you would like to discuss, we'll stay here until Don kicks us out, and, is that 2 minutes? Yeah. So we'll stay around and talk as long as you would like to, and then also, Don will have Brian and I's information, and I absolutely mean this. If you would like someone to come and talk to your organization, please reach out to us, because we'd love to send somebody to talk about what we do for us as a nation. So, yeah.
That's a perfect wrap, so we'll just go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.